ladies and gentlemen. BGG here from DinarUpdates.com. Appreciate everybody for being here. Before we get going, we have Pastor Daniel on with us. Pastor, would you say, start?
Sure. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, for the opportunity we have to get together once again to learn more about this investment, to learn more about the future of Iraq, the future of their economy, and potentially the future opportunities for us, the blessing to folks. Help us take this opportunity and use it to your glory. Bless this time now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it so much. Okay, before we get going here, I want to make sure it's going to be a laid-back night. With tons and tons of news. But I want to make sure I thank some of our leaders. Miss BGG put out a post earlier today on the Facebook group, and I'm just going to reiterate what she said. She wanted to thank Kaylee Wall, Bobby Cahill, Sherry Miller, Pat Corbin, Karen Elizabeth, and Romello for the news in the current Iraq section of the forum. We really appreciate you guys and your leadership on the site. Hawk, make sure everybody out there checks out the current Iraq news thread on the forum Facebook group. We use both those groups interchangeably, but we use the forum as our receptacle for news articles. We try to stay news-based. So anyway, thank you guys. I really appreciate y'all. Somebody this week, I'm going to go off on little riffs here throughout the whole night, but somebody this week was like just begging me to come in and do some kind of opinion or something about what I thought about. Man, some of these researchers are so fake. I mean, when you say that I'm the only one that kind of have an opinion about anything, I mean, all these people, 7 people here, really know what's going on. Mr. White's on the call with us. Any of these people can tell you what's going on. All you got to do is ask. And, they'll tell you. And then you got to go do a little research. Just read the article. They'll tell you what you need to know. So, having said that, okay, a lot of people on tonight. It's good to see you all here. Thank you for being here. Current Iraq, tonight's call, recent headlines with some Q&A. I'll cover some recent headlines. What do I think about these headlines? And then we're going to open up Q&A when we're done. Make sure you hit *6 on your keypad. That will put you in line to ask a question. We'll get to as many callers as we can tonight. Here's our first headline. Al-Jafari, this is Ibrahim Al-Jafari, which is, I think he's the former oil minister. But anyway, I don't even know what his current, he's still with the government. I don't even know what he's currently up to, but he says world countries want to invest in Iraq. Of course, and the point is, they know exactly what's going on. Iraq knows what's going on. They're kind of playing the debutante right now. Everybody wants to invest in Iraq. Conditions are going to have to be right. Last week was a huge week for Iraq. They were kind of center stage in Washington, D.C. with the IMF. The spring meeting, everybody being there. Kind of a normal thing, but there's a lot of conversation about Iraq. Another headline today, CBI directs banks to implement SWIFT standards. That's big news. I saw some people kind of down this, and I'm like, why would you complain about that? I mean, there's a secondary money transfer protocol that's used by the EU and some of the Middle Eastern countries, and obviously it's recognized by some Far East countries. That's kind of that map, so to speak. But SWIFT codes are more recognized by England, United States, Canada, kind of the Western developed world. That's what SWIFT is all about. So if you really want true international integration or international reintegration, that's kind of some big news. I don't know exactly what. I'm not saying that points to anything directly today or tomorrow or the next day. It's big news though, and they talked about today. Actually, they kind of laid out a timeline in this particular article by the end of 2017. But there's another piece not that long ago that talked about They want this done by the end of November, so they're talking like 33 days. They want this finished by all Iraqi banks to implement SWIFT standards. Mr. White.
Here you go, Tom.
Yeah.
Most international wire transfers are executed through the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, SWIFT network. Knowing there is not a working relationship with the destination bank, the originating bank can search the SWIFT network for a correspondent bank that has arrangements with those banks. And the sole purpose of correspondent banks is the exchange of currencies between one bank or the other.
We've been talking about this for 2 months. You know, the reintegration of Iraq to the international markets. And you can't do any of that until, and you know, here's the concept that I've talked about a few times recently with some friends. You know, we thought when they put this whole project off in 2012, I'm almost convinced that Maliki, council ministers, everybody looked at it and said, look, there's just too much stuff. We were never going to be able to do this. Let's just put it off right now. And coupled with the fact that they never really had any intention of anything but a dinar policy, you know, those two factors, we as investors had no clue that that's what the case is. But when you talk about monetary and economic reform, all of the things that you see happening in front of you. Now, am I saying today or tomorrow or even a year from now? I am not. I'm not even coming close to that. So don't infer that any of these statements are in any way leaning one way or the other. I'm simply commenting on the tone and tenor and texture of the news. But when you look at all of the things that they are doing, I would tend to believe, I would tend to comment that it looks like they are in the middle of reintegrating with the international community. This is exactly what the first part of that Delete the Zeros project would have to look like. We're halfway through the project right now. They're working on it. Now, how long does that take? I have no idea. I mean, I'm not even pretending to know. And I don't want even to come close to that implication. But when you look at the fact that they had very few SWIFT code associations, and they are working on that right now, that's crazy. That's good. That is really good news. Thank you, Mr. White, for that.
Yeah, and that video that's been going around, the Center for Strategic and International Studies last Wednesday had a powerful lineup on their panel. And if you listen to them, all that they're talking about is the reintegration of their banking sector with the world. And it's such a complete overview of where they are. And our good friend, Dennis Flannery, the guy that, man, I tell you, that's where I hang my hat. He spoke. And they are in the middle of this, pushing forward, and they talk about some of the subjects talk about has been spoken about on these calls. So, but, you know, whenever you want to get into that,
Flannery actually forecasted this a year ago, almost a year ago. He forecasted the very happening.
Yeah, and when he spoke about correspondent banks and how there's many banks in Iraq that Citibank would be glad to team with, but they are prevented from the regulators back here in the United States from expanding, that they are required to keep it at a very minimal. And again, correspondent banks, folks, go look it up, Google it, correspondent banks. What are their purpose in life? It's they're a go-between when a domestic bank is moving money overseas and there's an exchange from one currency to the other. They handle the exchange of the currencies. that's exactly that's why we're here. Go ahead, Tom.
That's fantastic. Okay, moving on. We're covering headlines. Got a few more to cover. A lot meets with a group of professors of critical theory to explain the most prominent developments in monetary policy, and the last two words of that, in recent years, or in the last 2 years. That wasn't part of that headline, but that's actually what it is. And one of my comments earlier is that I would look for some kind of a delete the zeros article from one of these professors, economics professors, somebody like that, in the next week or so, and either pro or con. I don't know how they're going to react to it, because some of these characters have been anti, delete the zero. Some have been for it, but it's interesting that he's meeting with the academia of Iraq and explaining some of the prominent developments in monetary policy, what they intend to do with it. So, I did predict that a little bit. We should see some kind of an article out of one of these professor gurus sometime in the next week or two about the delete zero specifically. They cannot keep a secret. These guys have to get out there and write what they do. So look for that. And we've seen some of that in the past. Especially about that particular subject. They talk about it. They have their input. International coalition says a ceasefire agreement between the Iraqi forces and cops. I would not worry about this. I've talked about it in the past. Fighting a little more risky lately than it has been. I thought it would go a lot easier than this, but much like I told you from the beginning, I quit worrying about that. I mean, this is all about Barzani inciting a little bit of friction to kind of keep things at a status quo for the moment, but he's in deep, deep trouble, folks. An Iraqi prime minister says, hashtag Baghdad will stop all military operations. It says on Kurdistan region for 24 hours. It actually means in Kurdistan region for 24 hours. But they're pulling back. They're doing every single thing the international community wants them to do. And they are kind of giving Kurdistan a chance, but the whole of Kurdistan. There are multiple factions, at least 3 major factions within Kurdistan, and probably 2 of them do not want this. This is not what they want. This is going to go wrong, wronger than it has already. So anyway, next headline says a body orders a 24-hour suspension of military forces in all disputed areas. That's Mosul, Kirkuk, anywhere in Kurdistan, all those northern territories. Want everybody to pull back. He's doing the right thing. Abadi's done a fantastic job of. Here was a comment somebody made. They said somebody kind of made one of those frustrated comments of, why is Iraq listening to Iran? Well, it's not exactly quite that simple. Iraq doesn't particularly listen to Iran totally, and they don't particularly listen to the United States totally. If you're trying to draw a straight line border between Iraq and Turkey and Iran, it's not anywhere close to that simple in that region. It's a much more geographical, religious, and it's a people group, an ethnic group alliance. And there are significant alliances between the Shias in Iraq and the Shias in Iran. So there's significant crossover there. Is Iraq the government what they call the Baghdadis? Do they completely bow down to, and does Iran run Iraq? No, not even close. So quit saying that. That's just a whiny, ill-informed complainer mentality. That's not what's going on. Iraq's going to eventually do what's good for Iraq. I mean, they're being swayed by Iran. There's a lot of Shia influence in the government of Iraq, but it's not. Ultimately, I'm very confident that Iraq's going to wind up on the side of Iraq. I mean, if anybody has forgotten that Iran and Iraq were in a war that lasted 10 years and depleted both of their economies to almost nothing, I promise you Iran hasn't forgot it, and I promise you Iraq hasn't forgot it. So quit worrying about it. It's not going to go down. Great headline here. It was just it looked like a kind of an op-ed, and I forget what, I would know that news source. I looked right at it. That's kind of interesting. It was about the investment law. That the investment law number 13 of 2006 and its amendments have been legislated, and it was kind of like an op-ed piece about the investment law, what it was. But I noted to take a pertinent comment from the investment law that the investment law number 13 of 2006 and its amendments have been legislated, but this law needs to stand at some of its joints to establish a successful investment process in the country. And they're saying, we already have the investment law. We need to implement it right now. And this goes to the very core of what's going on in Iraq. They're trying to reintegrate with the international economy, world economy, and they're trying to attract investment. But to do that, they have to deregulate. They have to get these burdensome regulations off of small business, off of business in general, and off of capital. That's exactly. Basically what they're saying is we have the laws in place. Let's just strip away the regulation. Parliamentary Finance Committee says Cabinet discussed the issue of reducing the salaries of state employees. This is going to meet, and this is essentially the GOI, the government of Iraq, responding to the IMF, and the World Bank. They've got to they've got to get their expenditures under control. And when you've got cousins, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers, everybody that you know on the payroll, when you've got the power companies bloated with salaries, they have 3 times as many people on payroll as they need. They're always complaining about not having enough money. The Parliamentary Finance Committee is discussing what they're going to do about this. They are responding to international communities because they're borrowing money from the world. And listen, even if they don't borrow money from the world, everybody says, well, let's just RV, that'll solve everything. Well, who's going to pay the tab for this RV? It's not going to be Iraq. It's going to be the world. Because, listen, who's going to buy that currency at a much higher rate? Not Iraq. Everybody else. You can RV your currency whatever number you want, but if there's nobody to buy it, you don't have an RV. All you have is a big old price tag. So they're responding to the world and their insistence on a certain amount of fiscal responsibility. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, some of these people that are saying just RV the currency, they've got this mentality that changes the value of their currency, that changes the value of the IQD in Iraq. It doesn't change nothing to the IQD inside Iraq. It's only relevant to outside. Our currency.
As far as the static price of currency, you're exactly right. It'll change the price of goods in Iraq. But
yes, it'll bring them down tremendously. Yeah. But that doesn't change. That doesn't fix anything today.
Right.
It doesn't change the overspending of a ministry. It's going to help the guy on the street, the shop owner, and the people buying goods that are imported. But it ain't, like you said, the bloated ministry doesn't do a thing for them. The only thing that's going to fix that is to cut the daggum costs of the liability.
They're working on that right now. And that's what this headline is. The council ministers, Parliamentary Finance Committee, discussed the issue of reducing state dollars, which they said is going to be rejected in the Parliament in the event of deduction. But they pointed out deductions at the moment are very appropriate unless goods services are provided to the citizens, which we know that's not going to be true for some time. So they're going to have to figure out how to get that. But broad view, they're responding to the IMF. They're responding to the World Bank and the United Nations. Those are the 3 entities they got to talk to. So, and another thing, Mr. White brought this up. We kind of dug up this issue. One thing I haven't talked about, I may not talk about it that much on this call. I'm going to do the call. About that. One thing people are going to be just shocked as all get out about is about the exchange process. I don't think we're going to have time for this. We'll probably do in our next call. We've got 2 or 3 major topics that are going to be talked about on the next call, but one of them is about the exchange process. People are going to be just people walk down to the bank with $1 million IQD, slap it on the counter, and say, "I want $1 million." And the banker's going to look at them like they've lost their mind. There's no way. I mean, is it value? Does it add something to your portfolio? Is it an investment? Is it worth something? Absolutely. But once there is some radical value change, when that occurs, it will be a process to be able to market it effectively. The effective exit, the effective entry, the effective marketing of that product, it will be a very, very serious situation. There's going to be people, I would predict this right now. There's going to be people lose 50 and 75% of their value on day one because they're just in a big hurry and they have no idea what's about to happen. We're going to leave that for another call. Got a lot to talk about on the topic. Okay, next 3 headlines. Tillerson was talking about support of a youth. Tillerson talking about it was in a tweet. Tillerson talking about support of a unified Iraq and Geneva is essentially Rex walking the tightrope. He's got to walk both sides of this. He's kind of leaning a little bit more on the side of the GOI. That is it. Period. There's almost nothing to be gathered from that statement at this point. There was a headline that said the body rejects the Kurdish offer and the battles are raging. And my comment is relax. This is Iraq. Someone's always shooting at somebody else. You should look on the bright side. At least it's not the south side of Chicago. I've been there. It's bad news. We had it was several years ago, we had a contact to, this last, about a week ago, we had this surfacing of the fact that, or the surfacing of the deep allegation, I'll call it, that Maliki and Barzani were always in collusion with one another, that Maliki was never going to be, he would never receive a vote of no confidence from the parliament because Barzani had done a secret deal with him prior to that he would allow the Peshmerga to continue to expand in exchange for delivering to Maliki a percentage of the smuggled oil revenue. And this smuggled oil revenue is where Maliki was getting a significant amount of money. So essentially, both Barzani and Maliki were stealing from Iraq, is the allegation. And I was, it just really struck me because, and I commented about this, but it just dawned on me because we had a contact who was I won't even go into who it was or where it was, very, very close to some heavy duty political people in Iraq. Would call once in a while. We'd have conversations. We'd talk back and forth. I very often never did. I mean, it's not uncommon. He was convinced Maliki would either win a second term. He was convinced Maliki would win a third term. He thought there's no way he could win. And I was over and over and over insistent that wouldn't happen just for a lot of political reasons. I mean, I don't care how much political mojo the guy had. He was in bad shape. And there were 100 reasons I could go into. I'm not going to go into them. Just to say that not every single thing that he had to say, we swallowed lock, stock, and barrel. We appreciated the input. We looked at it. We were grateful for it. I'd love to have that insight today. But one of the key comments that he made, and it just struck me that it probably was this very connection. He said Maliki will never receive that vote of no confidence because he has unseen allies in places you will not believe. He said he has allies in places you just cannot fathom. And I'm sure because of his position and because of what he did for them and what, where he was able to go, his access to critical documents, he knew exactly what he was talking about. And I'm sure he was talking about this document right here, this connection between Barzani and Maliki. And that's exactly why that vote of no confidence was dead in the water before anybody. And a lot of it, the point is, here's the funny thing. I'm sure Talabani knew that relationship existed, and I'm sure he was the one that took the blame. But the point is, he knew if it got past him, it was still going to, Barzani would never put up with it. The point is, the Kurds wound up, not using their critical third vote that would have, not using their sway that would have ensured Maliki's no confidence, and then all of this economic and political advancement would happen a lot sooner. Hopefully, that's the hope. But anyway, having said all that, and then then you'd have unlikely that Mosul with ISIS would have never happened, or likely that it would never happen. You just wouldn't have the same situation play out. So I thought that was interesting. That article and that comment from a very, very, very one of the best contacts in the whole game that ever has existed. It dawned on me as I was kind of walking around here the other day. It just struck me that I'm sure that that's exactly what he was talking about. So anyway, having said all that, those are our news headlines. That's what we're going to talk about. Hit *6 on your keypad if you want to ask a question. First caller is from the 917 area code. Thanks for calling, and you are a live caller.
Good evening, BGG, Mr. White. How are you? This has been a great presentation so far. I wanted to ask you a bunch of things, but the first thing I wanted to ask you is the power that Maliki still has, and the underpinnings that he has to keep him in a peripheral position. Is that slowly been eaten away through the political process as people wake up and see the correct course and that Iraq is undertaken, and all the nation building steps Iraq has taken? Has that undermined Maliki's huge contact network over the years?
Well, make no mistake, he's still very powerful. However, I believe that he's greatly, greatly minimized, and I think that Abadi has done such a fantastic job in the world's view. And Abadi has walked an incredible tightrope between all of these political factions that I relayed earlier, which is the Iran, the Shias, the Baghdadi Shias, the Sunni. He's dealing with Saudi Arabia. He's drawing Saudi Arabia into it. It's the hardcore Sunnis, and he's even, I'm sure behind the scenes, there are a few shots being fired with the Kurdish Peshmerga, but I believe that there's going to be an upheaval in Kurdish politics fairly soon, because this thing is not good for Kurdistan. It's good for Barzani, period. And it's surely a mechanism to keep him in place. That's all it is. It's not. It has. When Tillerson offered Kurdistan the golden unicorn ticket of all tickets, and he didn't take it, what's the problem? He offered them everything that they would ever need to integrate with the world market economies, United Nations, and the IMF as independent countries. When Barzani didn't take that, then you have to stop and think, what really is at stake here?
Right. The switch was off, and it didn't matter who offered him what.
It didn't. He for his country, he had achieved everything. If he bowed out right then, and they did what they wanted in the span of 18, 24 months, Kurdistan would be very semi-autonomous, pretty much functioning within the world community as a country. And I think there's almost no way you can sell me on the fact that Barzani was just being pragmatic and saying it would never happen. Barzani was being pragmatic and saying, I'm never going to do this because where this ends for me is him in a hole somewhere, not as the president of the region. That's it.
Right. Do you think he's going to have to physically resign? Is there such a thing like the Mueller investigation that's going on now, where they're going to try to get people to flip on Maliki and other high-level ranking Shia and Kurds to capitulate on in terms of their corruption and
Dude, not get started. Mueller's going to be lucky if he doesn't go to jail too. I mean, if it really boils down to it, but I mean, on the flip on people thing, I mean, let's just stick with Iraqi politics here.
They don't do that there.
I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't know, but the basic premise of your comment was, or your question, and this is the best way to answer this, is I think Maliki is much greatly minimized position than he ever has been. And really, when he's in a greatly minimized position, we're in a much better position.
Okay. And the media isn't being influenced by Maliki generally on balance?
I think a lot less than we were, a lot less than they have been in the past. I think obviously he was very, very powerful, and everybody was scared to death of him. But I think that part of that's long in the past.
The last thing I wanted just to say, if there was one thing, I mean, obviously your point about you can float this, you can float or tag the currency to the dollar, whatever you want to do at any price, and if nobody wants it, relative to the fundamentals of the country, it's not going anywhere. So,
right.
You look at the support of fraud projects, and you hear, the Chinese, and you hear, there's a massive amount of money that sees the infrastructure capabilities from a world trade standpoint, obviously in their benefit. But, none of the fundamentals have unfolded to any extent, right? This could be $1 trillion economy in 3 years, 4 years. But right now, it's still in flux. So that's that's keeping somewhat of a lid on how careful they are about going forward with this RV.
Well, let me comment on some of this, okay? There's so much money coming into Iraq that it's easy to mix a lot of it. A lot of the stuff that we remember following the liberation of Mosul was all these countries were offering up billions and billions and billions of dollars towards reconstruction. Those are grants that are going to come into the country via the World Bank. It has nothing to do with the Iraqi currency. It's coming in.
Or the economy.
Right, or the economy. It's money that's promised, that's going to be used, that's going to be distributed via the World Bank and some other United Nations organizations for humanitarian stuff. Those are going to build the bridges and the sewer treatment facilities and the hospitals and so forth. All this other stuff is tied towards the economy, but still the economy is not going to get out of neutral until Iraq decides to start satisfying its foreign remittances and credits via the IQD. And this is what they're doing when they're saying they're trying to establish relationships with banks and with correspondent banks. No correspondent banks, IQD, no takey, because it's got to be exchanged somewhere. And that's the purpose of the correspondent banks. And I just cannot overemphasize, that's where we're at. How do we know this? Because they told us. There's no big secret.
Right, and behind the IQD will be enough in place for people to jump from the conclusion that Iraq's going to roll back into their past history. That's not a possibility anymore. They're going to roll. With a perception change in terms of the global investment community, the currency guys who are going to be buying the currency or whatever, the perception shift is going to take place. They put enough in place to convince people of the future, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you can use Kuwait as an example. They're probably the most valuable currency on the face of the earth, but it's used very little. because it is so expensive.
Right.
And there's very little investment into Kuwait because it's so expensive. So what does Iraq do? Well, first of all, Kuwait's economy doesn't justify 355. You look at Iraq, and it's 10, 20, 30 times more, 100 times more than what Kuwait is. But you go down, you look at Oman, and they're at, I think, 240, 250. And that currency is used even more. You can go to Citibank, you can go to Fargo and look up that and see what it would take to buy and sell that. So this thing about, let me just expand a little bit further, about floating. It ain't float, but let's say you sell your home. Your home's going to float, right, as to what the price is. But are you going to put your home out there 1,000 times less valuable than what it truly is? So you're going to put it on the market at something reasonable. Well, in my opinion, when Iraq makes that move, when those banks are authorized to settle foreign remittances and credits in IQD, and all of those relationships are in place in Great Britain and in Asia and Europe and the United States, and correspondent banks are all there because that is exactly what they're doing today. They're going to introduce their currency at what is believed to be reasonable. And it sure isn't what it is today.
Right, and there's no sense speculating on it, but it's enough to deal with the foreign remittance issues, and it's also attractive enough to continue to attract investment capital, net investment capital into the country. So that's
well, you think about it, though, and I'm glad Tom's letting us talk like this. If you're a major corporation and you're getting ready to make $100 million move into some other country, you're going to take into account what the exchange rate is and what the cost is and so forth. But you're also going to figure you're going to be coming back out with your profit somewhere close. So, in my opinion, the true value is more of an Iraqi issue and not a Canadian businessman or a French businessman or American businessman, because there's a wash there. Hey, Tom.
Right.
Yep.
So it's going to be the return on capital for the foreign companies coming in there, not so much the Iraqi currency value. I mean, it's going to be at a reasonable level, but it has to support itself. A while ago, you had talked about, we had talked about the legs of the metrics that establish the currency value, and certainly 325 is not feasible. But it's an interesting country in that it doesn't have the same export requirements to survive that some of the Asian and Southeast Asian countries need, where they don't have a lot of wiggle room in their currency values.
Right, and China's the perfect example. China purposely keeps everything cheap because they export 90%. Iraq imports, and because they import on such a undervalued, their costs are so much higher.
Right.
They raise the value, their costs are going to be reduced.
Professor and BGG, thank you guys. You were great. I appreciate it. You can let me go.
Fantastic. Thank you, caller. Great conversation. Let's do it again soon.
Yep.
Appreciate it so much. Boy, were we in for a treat or what? Listen, *6 if you want to get in line to ask a question. I'm going to get the next couple here, and if we got nobody else, we're going to call it a night. Next caller, *6 on your keypad to ask a question. Next caller is from the 602 area code. 602, thanks for calling. You're live.
Yes, I believe that the Bank of Baghdad already has a SWIFT code in place for doing in and out money transfers.
Some do, but the article was about the CBI one to all banks, the one everybody. They didn't want anybody left out.
I see. Okay.
That was the stipulation, is that they didn't want, there was two different dates. One was by the end of the year and one was by the end of November, but they wanted all banks. And that's what they're trying to, they're banking reform, economic reform, monetary reform. They want everybody on board. They don't want to leave anybody out. They may have two or three of their majors able to do those kind of transfers, but not everybody. Not even close, actually.
Okay. Well, that's all I got.
Fantastic. Thanks, caller. Great point, by the way. Next caller is from the 814 area code. Thanks for calling, and you are live.
Hello. Yeah, it was a great call. Is the Locke still acting governor, or is he actually the formal governor of CBI?
All the references that I have seen is that they refer to him as the governor of the Central Bank of Iraq. They do not.
Okay, so he's not just an acting one. Okay.
Doesn't refer to him.
Pardon me?
Yeah. Doesn't refer to him as the acting. It refers to him as the governor of the Central Bank of Iraq.
So he's actually, you think he's official?
Sounds like it. Sounds like it to me. Now, I'm not really necessarily taking sides one way or the other. I'm just saying, based on their references, it looks like that's exactly what he is.
Okay, sounds good. That's what I want to know. I appreciate your call. I really do.
Very good. Thank you so much, caller. Appreciate you calling in, taking the time.
Okay,
and
thanks.
Hope we can do it again.
Yeah, we will.
You have a great
Again, thanks for bringing the information.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Tom.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, that just made me think about something. Hey, talking about that video of that conference that was in D.C. at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The people on that panel was a gentleman, the executive director of the Iraqi Private Bank League, was our buddy Dennis Flannery, who his title, besides with Citibank, managing director in Iraq, country head and representative Citibank. John Sullivan, director of Financial Integrity Network, another gentleman with the Central Bank of Iraq, and an ambassador, a former U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Burundi. Another gentleman, Center of Strategic Research Institute for National Studies. Another one with an advisor, Iraqi Private Banks League. And the theme from this thing was how good, how positive the Central Bank of Iraq has been, and the steps they have taken to do the right things. And you know what? You can you gotta hand out kudos to the people that deserve it, and it's pretty much the members of the United States, the embassy over there, as well as the UN and the World Bank, are saying great things about the Central Bank of Iraq. You got to say something about Ismail.
That's right. Doing a good job. Well, listen, everybody. Mr. White, thank you so much for being on tonight. We really appreciate every time you're on with us. We're better for it. And appreciate everybody who has commented, called in, and going back to my original commentary, really want to thank Oki Dinar, One Bobby, Sherry Miller, Pat Corbin, Karen Elizabeth, Romello, and all the people that bring news into the Current Iraq News thread. Check us out on the blog, dinarupdates.com/blog, dinarupdates.com/observer, on our Facebook group, on the Current Iraq News thread. There are news articles and information every single day, commentary when I'm able. Make sure you stay tuned to all of our feeds, and we will continue to bring you more Dinar news, Dinar info, and Dinar commentary as we're able. Have a great night, folks.
Goodbye.